Mom paused for a moment before asking a question that hit me harder than I expected. Do you ever lose your temper like that with coworkers, your boss, or your friends and family? If not, then why is it okay to lash out at your husband? Hi, I'm Kai. I've always been someone who values my own space and would describe myself as more of an introvert. While many people thrive on being out and socializing, I've always found peace in my hobbies. They've become my way of reconnecting with myself. My hobby room isn't just a physical space, it's my sanctuary. It's the place where all the things that make me who I am come together. Inside that room, I have everything I need to immerse myself and escape from the outside world. For example, my racing simulator isn't just a game to me. I fully dive into it. The seat, the wheel, the pedals, it's all designed to make me feel like I'm really there. I don't just play. I experience the speed, focus on every turn, and live every movement. It's thrilling and exhilarating. Then there's my flight simulator setup. I'm not a pilot, but with my joystick and realistic software, it feels like I'm actually flying. It's freeing, almost like I have complete control over my surroundings. Soccer is another passion of mine. I have tools that allow me to analyze stats, study plays, and break down strategies. I can spend hours watching matches, dissecting every move in detail. The tactics, patterns, and unpredictability of the game fascinate me endlessly. And then there are my Legos. They're not just toys for kids. Some of the sets I have are incredibly complex, and I enjoy building things from scratch, paying attention to every single detail. It's deeply satisfying to see something come together piece by piece, and each build feels like a meaningful accomplishment. Music is another creative outlet for me. My setup includes synthesizers, a soundboard, and equipment for mixing tracks and experimenting with beats. Music has always been a way for me to express the emotions I can't easily put into words. It's like another language, one that helps me relax and let go. These hobbies aren't just ways to pass the time. They're part of who I am. They help me process my thoughts, clear my head, or simply escape when I need a break from everything else. When Amy came into my life, things started to change. I've always been someone who lives in my own world, partly because being autistic makes it harder for me to connect with others. It's not that I don't want to connect, it's just that sometimes it feels like I'm speaking a different language than everyone else. So when someone like Amy came along, someone who understood me without trying to change me, it was an entirely new experience. When we first met, I didn't expect her to understand everything about me, let alone try to. But she did. It wasn't about her making me fit into some mold of what she thought I should be. Instead, it was about her taking the time to truly see me. She realized I wasn't being difficult or weird on purpose. I was just being myself. Early in our relationship, she'd spend time with me in my hobby room. She didn't share my enthusiasm for racing or analyzing soccer stats, but she showed interest because she knew those things mattered to me. It wasn't about her suddenly loving everything I loved or developing the same passions I had. It was about her choosing to sit with me in my space, being there because it meant something to me. For her, it might have seemed like a small thing, but to me, it was huge. She stepped into my world and accepted it as it was, without trying to change me or make me feel like I needed to hide parts of myself. I never thought I'd meet someone who would marry me without needing to know or understand every little detail about me, but Amy did, and I didn't have to change who I was to make it work. I think about that a lot. How easy it could have been for her to walk away when things got hard or when she didn't fully understand me. But she didn't. She stayed. And maybe that's what love is really about. Accepting someone as they are. That's how I knew she was the one I could build a life with. She didn't love me in spite of my quirks. She loved me because of them. Hi, I'm Amy. I've reached a point where I don't even know how I got here, but this is where we are now. At first, Kai's hobbies were cute and endearing, something I admired about him. I thought they were just a part of his personality, and I respected that. But over time, they've grown into something that feels overwhelming. They dominate everything now, and I feel like an outsider in my own marriage. At first, I tried to support him. I'd sit with him as he raced on his simulator, watching his face light up as he explained his strategies. I'd nod along when he talked about his latest Lego build or his music production setup. pretending to share his excitement. I did it because I wanted to connect with him, even if those things weren't what I was interested in. It slowly dawned on me that this wasn't about sharing anymore. It had turned into a cycle of being pulled into Kai's world repeatedly, leaving me with little say in the matter. "Come join me in the hobby room," he'd say, as though it were an offer I should always accept. But it wasn't an invitation, it was an expectation. His world, his terms. Even a night to myself was out of reach without him urging me to join him in a space that never felt like mine. I kept telling myself I was being unreasonable, that I needed to be more understanding, yet the resentment continued to build until it felt like my life was orbiting around his interests. It wasn't just the racing simulator or the Lego sets, it was everything. His entire existence seemed tied to his hobbies, and I began to feel invisible, like none of it included me in a meaningful way. What made it worse was that I couldn't even be angry with him. From his perspective, he was simply passionate about the things he loved. He couldn't see how much it was wearing me down, how much I hated being dragged into it over and over. The breaking point came one afternoon when he asked me to join him again. I couldn't hold it in any longer. It wasn't anger that surfaced, it was sheer exhaustion. I was drained from pretending to care, from feigning interest in things that meant nothing to me. I had tried to be understanding, to show him I could be part of his world, but I had nothing left to give. "Do you really want me to come back there again?" I snapped, the words escaping before I realized what I was saying. "Every time you ask, it feels like I'm suffocating. I can't breathe with you dragging me into this all the time. It's so repetitive, so boring." Even as the words spilled out, I couldn't stop myself. I was too tired, physically and emotionally, to hold back anymore. I saw his expression crumble. He didn't understand. He never understood. He stared at me, his wide eyes filled with disbelief, as if I had physically struck him. But the floodgates were open, and I couldn't stop. "You're acting like a child, Kai," I continued, my voice fluctuating over the words with lack of control. "You spend all your time on your toys, your racing, your Legos, your stupid music setup. When was the last time you hung out with friends or did something that wasn't just for you? You've completely isolated yourself, and now you're dragging me down with you like I'm supposed to be excited about it." "Ah!" He opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. I had to let it all out before I exploded. "Honestly, I don't even know why I married you sometimes," I said, the words cutting deeper than I intended. "You're so wrapped up in your little world that I feel like I don't even know you anymore. You're not living in the real world, Kai. You're hiding in your sanctuary, and I'm supposed to sit there and watch?" I didn't wait for his reply. I couldn't. If I stayed any longer, I was going to break down completely. Turning away, my heart pounded in my chest, my thoughts racing. "Maybe you should get a life outside of all this," I muttered under my breath, the words harsh and bitter. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding in your little bubble." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel his gaze on me, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. I was too angry, too overwhelmed, and too raw. I had spoken the truth I'd been suppressing for so long, and there was no going back. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to figure out if I could even keep doing this. Kai retreated to the couch after my outburst, his thoughts spiraling as he sat in silence. He couldn't even bring himself to step into his hobby room. The space that once brought him joy now felt tainted, like a reminder of rejection rather than comfort. For the first time, he didn't want to race, build, or create. He just sat there, staring blankly at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. He couldn't stop replaying the things Amy had said. She had called him childish, accused him of not having a life, and questioned why she married him. The last part stung the most. Why did she marry him, if this was who he had always been? Did she think he'd change? Had he unintentionally given her that impression? Kai thought back to his father's marriage to his mother, remembering the emotional distance that grew between them. His dad was always consumed by work, and his mom had spent years looking lonely and defeated as their relationship unraveled. Kai had vowed he would never let that happen to him, but now he saw the parallels. The difference was that he thought he had done everything right. He had shared his world with Amy, invited her into his sanctuary, and shown her every part of himself. But maybe that wasn't what she wanted after all. He stopped trying. No more hobby room. No more invitations to share his interests. If it wasn't enough, it felt pointless to keep trying. He buried himself in work instead, avoiding the icy silence that now defined their home. Amy didn't say much after her outburst, and Kai lacked the energy to start a conversation. The worst part was realizing he was shutting down emotionally, just like his father had. He hated it but didn't know how else to cope. Maybe Amy had wanted someone different all along. Maybe he wasn't the right person for her, or worse, for anyone. He was stuck in a loop, trying to mold himself into someone else's expectations. For the first time, he considered the possibility of divorce, not as something he wanted, but as something he might need to protect himself from the hurt. The thought of letting go, of Amy, of the marriage, of the idea that someone could truly accept him for who he was, tore at him. But he couldn't bring himself to say it aloud. Instead, he sat in the silence, feeling like the life he had built was crumbling around him. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table like a quiet accusation, staring back at Amy as she held her phone and sobbed to her mother. "I don't know what happened," she choked out. "I thought we were okay. I didn't think he'd actually leave." Her mom's voice was calm, but the disappointment in her tone was unmistakable. Honey, you've been upset with him for a long time. Maybe he finally hit his breaking point," Mom said gently. Her words stung, and I couldn't stop myself from snapping back, sharper than I intended. "That doesn't make it right," I shot back, my frustration bubbling over. "I didn't mean for things to end like this. He should have told me how he was feeling instead of just walking away." There was a pause on the other end of the line, the silence heavy, before Mom asked a question that struck deeper than I was ready for. "Do you ever lash out at coworkers, your boss, your friends or family like that? If not, then why was it okay to take it out on your husband? Why couldn't you hold your temper with the one person who was supposed to mean the most to you?" I froze, our words hanging in the air. The answer was painfully clear. No, I wouldn't have spoken that way to anyone else. I never would have dared. But with Kai, I hadn't held back. He had become my safe space, the one person I thought I could unload all my frustrations and anger on. And now, only after he was gone, did I realize just how unfair that had been. "Oh, it's suffocating me, Mom," I murmured weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. Always in that hobby room, always asking me to join him. It was like he wanted me to be a part of every single thing he did, and I just needed some space. Mom sighed deeply before responding. "You know, when I was your age, I complained to my mom about your dad. He was always out in the garage, tinkering with that old car of his. I used to think he should have been inside, spending time with me, talking to me. Then my mom asked me something that changed my perspective. She said, 'Have you ever thought about grabbing a couple of drinks, taking a chair into the garage, and just sitting with him, maybe chat with him or bring a book and read while he works?' And you know what? I hadn't." I could hear Mom shifting on the other end of the call, her tone softening as she continued. "That's when I stopped complaining. Now there's a comfortable chair in the garage, a little bookshelf, even a TV. Your father never once asked me to join him out there, but when I did, we found a way to share that space. He felt valued, and so did I." Her words hit me like a wave, their weight undeniable. I knew what she was trying to tell me, but I wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. "So what are you saying?" I asked, my voice defensive. "That this is my fault? That I should have just gone along with whatever Kai wanted?" "No," Mom replied firmly, her tone unyielding. "What I'm saying is that marriage is about compromise, about meeting each other halfway. You didn't need to love what he loved, Amy, but you could have tried to be there for him, in a way that mattered to him, not just to you. You knew who he was before you married him, but you kept expecting him to change for you. And now you've lost him. You had a good man and you pushed him away." Her words felt like a physical blow, knocking the air out of me. She was right. I had a good man, a man who adored me, who wanted nothing more than to share his world with me. And instead of appreciating him, I had criticized him, belittled him, until he felt he had no choice but to leave. I ended the call shortly after, but her words echoed in my head, refusing to fade. You had a good man and you lost him. I wandered through the empty house, each room colder and more lifeless than the last. When I reached the hobby room, I hesitated before stepping inside. It was untouched, still meticulously organized, filled with all the things that made Kai who he was. My fingers traced the edges of his Lego sets, the smooth curve of the racing wheel, and the neatly stacked vinyl records. This had been his sanctuary, the place where he found peace and happiness, and I had made it feel like a prison. Sinking onto the couch, tears streamed down my face as the enormity of it all settled over me. Kai had never asked me to change. He had only wanted me to share a small part of what brought him joy, and I couldn't do it. Or maybe I wouldn't. Now I was left to face the consequences of my choices. The man who had loved me without conditions was gone, and there was no one to blame but myself. As much as it hurt to admit, Mom was right. I hadn't just lost Kai. I had pushed him away piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. Now, all I had was the oppressive silence of an empty house, and the unbearable weight of knowing I had let go of the one person who had truly loved me.